Hello and welcome to a new episode of In the District. Today we're sitting down with 3rd Avenue Bid Hub Executive Director, Pedro Suarez. Join us to learn more about his upcoming initiatives, his commitment to continue improving the hub, and much more. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and this program is brought to you from BronxNet's brand new media and technology studios in the South Bronx. Pedro, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, as I mentioned, you work in the 3rd Avenue, district bid pretty much. And, I want to talk a little bit more about your background as a Bronx native. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience and, maybe some ways that you've seen 3rd Avenue change being from the Bronx?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Bronx, lived here my entire life. I grew up on Fordham Road, where my parents still live to this day. And my first apartment out of college was actually right on East 148th Street and Brook Avenue. So I lived, basically in the hub for a few years. And then, having lived in Parkchester and Pelham Parkway, I've basically lived on different sides of the Bronx and have a deep understanding of how it sort of evolved, at least in the last, 30 years. When it comes to the hub and when I lived here, I think that the hub has always been known for attracting a large amount of people. It is the second to third most heavily trafficked business improvement district in the city, after only Times Square and potentially Fordham Road. And we're one of the oldest, having been around for over 30 years. And so with that, I think because of our position with transportation, we've always had a large number of people coming through the district. We have Lincoln Hospital nearby. And, I would say in terms of how it's changed, I think it's always been busy. It's always, I think, been known for shopping and where you can get a good deal, particularly around back to school and things of that nature. But coming out of the pandemic, I think that there are also a lot of concerns about the state of the district and things that we've definitely been focused on, particularly around public safety and sanitation, that are definitely top of mind. But ultimately, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. I think that the hub continues to be, I think, the center of commerce in the Bronx and continue to be that. And my goal is really to continue to position the district for continued investment, continued growth, and job creation.
Now, speaking of jobs, you've had a very diverse career, from working in economic mobility support to tackling commercial waste reduction. How have these experiences shaped your approach to community development and public service in the Bronx?
Yeah, my sort of view that's been shaped by my experiences for sure is taking a human-centered approach to everything that we do, that relationships are at the center. So whether it's working with the city, to local organizations, to businesses, to property owners, at the end of the day, it's about getting to know people, what motivates them, how can we align our goals? And I think at the end of the day, everyone wants roughly the same thing for 3rd Avenue, which is a safe, clean, thriving district. And so it's how to get to know people, how to make sure that we're on the same page, and making sure that the strategies that we're using make sense, are effective, and that we're revisiting the strategies that we're using in case they need to be tailored or changed. And so, working for city government, allowed me the opportunity to see all parts of the city. And, just growing up in the Bronx, knowing that it's very, very diverse. And just knowing that you have to interact with a variety of communities, different languages, different cultures, different backgrounds, and really, trying to be nimble and, in a sense, being able to work with everyone. And that's something that I think I've always been known for, is being able to work with everyone, being level-headed, and understanding that, at least for me, from my point of view, every human problem has a human solution. We just haven't found it yet.
Now, I want to touch on your educational background. As we know, education is super important. How has your background in academics in general, and your leadership impact the way you serve the people of the Bronx today?
Yeah, so one of the things I didn't mention was, I'm a Cardinal Hayes High School graduate, so very familiar again with the neighborhood. Going to Villanova University, studying political science, which also segued into working for a political campaign as one of my first jobs out of college. Was definitely very, very informative. And then, while I was working for the city, I decided to go back and get my master's in public administration. In addition to that, I don't just view education through the formal lens of like going to an institution. I think that there are a lot of different ways that you can educate yourself, and there are a lot of professional development programs out there. So in addition to formal higher education, I also pursued a lot of like leadership programs. I did an executive leadership program at Hostos Community College. I did Coro, which is a very well-known program, particularly in the economic development space. And I just actually applied for their neighborhood leadership program, so I hope that I get into that program as well, because they work very closely with bid leaders on a variety of projects. And so for me, it's always been about being in a constant state of learning. Like, the learning doesn't stop. And I think that anyone that thinks that, like, oh, I've learned enough and I know what I need to know, I think it's kind of stopped that process of learning, and challenges come up every day. Our community is always changing and evolving, and so it's always important, I think, to be open to going back, learning new things, being in community with people from a variety of backgrounds, so you can kind of check your assumptions and potentially your biases so that you can, I think, find innovative ways of dealing with challenges.
And I love that you talked about kind of pursuing the, I guess, non-traditional pathways to education through leadership programs. I understand that you also have certification in executive management. Can you talk about the importance of having those programs available to people in the Bronx who may not have, the same access to higher education?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm a big believer in cohort learning. So I'm really a big believer in just not, it's not just about a teacher or a professor in the classroom. It's about the people in the class, the students, teaching each other, engaging with each other. And so the great thing about a lot of professional development programs and leadership programs like Coro and the executive management program at Hostos was that you're in a room with other leaders in nonprofits, particularly in the local Bronx area, and you're able to talk about real problems, real challenges. And a lot of what I learned is that a lot of us went through, are going through very similar things. There's a lot that we can learn from each other. And so, that also informs, my thinking around workforce development, that yes, institutions are great, 2-year, 4-year colleges, the CUNY system is phenomenal, but it's also about giving people options and multiple access points. And so micro-credentialing has also been a strategy for folks that may not have access to 2- or 4-year colleges. The cost, student loans are also something that I think make certain individuals hesitate in terms of pursuing education. But there's a lot of great programs throughout the city that are often free or low cost, where people can gain and build skills. And so I strongly believe in cohort learning, being in community with others, talking about real issues on the ground, how to solve them, trying new things out. I think the application of knowledge is critical as part of the learning process. It's not just about, I did a thing, I completed a course. It's like, how did you take that into your personal or professional life? And I think that is really what we have to focus on. It's like, if people see the application of something, they're much more likely to become and be successful.
Now, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I wanted to segue into how did you use that experience to help, I understand you've done work with Lyft and you've helped low-income families. How have you used those leadership skills and all of those things that you've learned to help families in need?
Yeah, I think, again, my experience at Lyft, but then also my personal experience, I think has just reinforced this idea that things don't happen, magically, right? Like the conditions in certain communities, the state that people are at, a lot of it is a series of decisions that have been made over time. And so it's really about unpacking that and say, okay, where did we go wrong? Or what policies are not working? What strategies are not working? What needs to be tweaked and tailored to make sure that people are thriving in local communities? And so my work at Lyft, a lot of that was really working with social workers, who were dealing with a variety of individuals that had a lot of challenges and barriers, whether that's, being out of the workforce for a long time, being from a low-income background, having dealt with a variety of different traumas, or having children and childcare being a challenge and a barrier to being able to go back to work or being able to commit to a full-time job. So that gave me sort of the lens, that is very much applicable in my current situation, which is that we're at the center of the opioid epidemic and a housing crisis. And a lot of concerns around public safety. These things are not disconnected. There are a lot of connections between a lot of these different issues. And so it's really about, sitting down and saying, okay, what do we need to do differently? Because these are not new issues. They may have gotten worse. They may have widened, especially coming out of the pandemic. But when you're talking about the South Bronx and poverty, these are issues that have been here for decades. And it's really about addressing these issues and saying, okay, what is not working? Because a problem doesn't automatically get better. If anything, it is almost certainly guaranteed to get worse if it's not addressed. And so it's really about going back to the drawing board and saying, okay, how can we be in community and partnership with different organizations that have been doing this work for a long time and try something new or try something a little bit differently?
Now, I understand that you also have a lot of background working in many New York City organizations. One of them is the NYC Department of Sanitation, where you worked on commercial waste zoning and reduction. Can you tell me a little bit more about that experience? And as we know, that is like a huge challenge for the Bronx. So I'm curious to know, what were some challenges you faced when you worked in that field?
Yeah, so I worked for the Department of Sanitation about 4 years, and it was a great experience. I really loved working with the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability and my colleagues, many of them who I keep in touch with to this day. It was a great experience because it exposed me to parts of New York City that I had never seen. Like I got to travel and visit businesses throughout the 5 boroughs, Brooklyn, Queens, even parts of the Bronx that I had never been to, mainly industrial. Like I got to see manufacturing. I got to see chocolate makers in Brooklyn. I got to see, clothing makers in the garment district. Like there are all these great businesses in New York City that people may not be even aware of that have been here for a long time. And so that really just showed me there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to support businesses in New York City. And a lot of what I did there was educating businesses on waste reduction strategies as well as the city's regulations on recycling and waste management. And a lot of what I learned there, because sanitation is so much a part of what I do now with the bid, is that people it's oftentimes just something that people are not really paying attention to. Because of all the other priorities and all the other things that they're managing. And so it's really about sitting down, getting to know people and understand the impact of behaviors, habits that we form, and our protocols around certain things, right? A lot of these things can be changed and improved, but it's really about sitting down and saying, okay, how can we do things differently? And that's something that we're seeing in the district when it comes to the ways that businesses set out garbage, illegal dumping that's happening in the community. There's a conversation that needs to be had around we all have a part in improving the situation, but are we having that conversation at a large enough scale? And so those are the things that we're looking to do, is really sitting down with people and saying, hey, we can approach this differently in a way that's non-threatening, in a way that's not people feel like they're being attacked or punished. It's more about let's just change our behavior and just recognize that we all have an impact on how clean this district is. And so it's really about engaging folks in that way.
Well, Pedro, I want to thank you so much for sharing that, but it's time to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get some final thoughts from 3rd Avenue Bid Hub Executive Director, Pedro Suarez. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hope you're enjoying today's In the District discussion with 3rd Avenue Bid Hub Executive Director, Pedro Suarez. Pedro, once again, I want to thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Now, I want to jump right back into the conversation. When we left off, we were talking about small businesses, and I want to talk a little bit more about the work you've done with small business services. Can you just explain maybe what are some of the biggest obstacles small business owners are facing, particularly those who work or live in the Bronx?
Yeah, and so, I was basically a small business advocate and providing technical assistance to small businesses when I worked for a small business solution center in Lower Manhattan as well as Washington Heights. I think that there, are a variety of challenges. One is access to capital is probably one of the biggest ones that businesses will talk about, just making sure that they have, options when it comes to that, whether it's expanding to purchasing new equipment, to wanting to train and upskill staff, just making sure that they have a variety of options to do that. I would say the other thing is also just having an online presence is a big one that we've noticed, particularly with smaller, mom and pop stores, is their marketing strategy. We've had lots of conversations with local businesses, particularly on 3rd Avenue, about that, whether it's social media to their website, to just how they present themselves. And what I really want to do is really empower local businesses to find their voice and be their biggest advocates, so that they feel confident and feel comfortable, talking about their business. If they're in a room full of strangers, like how do they go about doing that? And that's something that we've noticed that there are business owners that need support around that and being more comfortable doing that. And sometimes they can approach it from like, oh, I'm not a salesperson, but we are. I mean, especially if you're selling a product or service, you do have to think about it in that way, but not in maybe the negative way that people think about it. That sales ultimately is about building relationships. It's like if you have good relationships and people like you and they know you and they trust you, they will want to do business with you. And that's really what I want businesses, not just in 3rd Avenue, but the Bronx, to understand that the more comfortable you get building those relationships, you may not see the fruit of that labor immediately, but over time, you will accumulate a network that will really benefit your business in the long term. And so those are some of the things that we've seen. I think that other things might include storefront beautification, making upgrades, technology upgrades, making sure that they're using, quality POS systems. Security is a big one that has also come up in terms of security cameras, and just merchandise, which is unfortunately something that we've had to deal with in the Bronx and other parts of the city. But that's something that we want to lean into, is providing, with the support of funders, potentially grants, or some kind of financial support to upgrade their security as well as their other systems in the business. So those are a few areas I think that we've looked at, but additionally, that's inside of the business. I think outside of the business, there's things that the BID definitely wants to do in terms of beautification. We're in the process of getting holiday lighting up, hopefully by Thanksgiving, and it'll be the first time that we've done holiday lighting in the district, I think, in a few years. So that'll be exciting. We also want to make sure that we're doing key events throughout the year to help promote the area and bring more foot traffic and economic impact to the district. So we're going to be doing a holiday event on December 7th. Pretty soon, and then we're looking to do key events in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. And so I think it's really about like habits and cadence and everyone being on the same page. And so that's also what I'm looking to do is launch a small business committee in the BID for them to also weigh in on marketing strategies of special events that we want to do to promote the district, and really bring people in.
Well, I was so happy to hear, the idea of holiday lighting, because I think, just small things like that really help the community feel like a community. It feels like people care about what's going on in the neighborhood. So I'd love to hear that. I also want to discuss further your plans to kind of help, the hub transform. Can you tell me a little bit more about your work on Roberto Clemente Plaza and the plans for that?
Yeah, I mean, Roberto Clemente Plaza, very transparently, is probably one of our biggest challenges. It's a beautiful plaza, and I think that it is an opportunity to bring people together. The plaza was, I think, opened around 2017, 2018, so it's a relatively new plaza. But then the pandemic hit, and I think that a lot of different conditions with the opioid epidemic, the housing crisis, it has really become, I think, the center of a lot of quality of life issues. But at the same time, it's also an opportunity to really come together as a community and make sure that folks that need assistance, that need services, get them. And so it's really about not just viewing it from the lens of like, we need to clean this up. It's more of like, well, if there are 50, 100 individuals that we know are in the plaza every day that potentially need assistance or services, how do we build trust with those individuals and make sure they get into those services and create a different path for themselves in terms of opportunities or going back to work or getting housing. So part of the vision for Roberto Clemente Plaza has been a combination of getting an additional police presence, and the NYPD has worked very closely with us and is, I think, out there pretty frequently. They have a hub team that's out in the district every day, but particularly in the plaza in the morning and around lunchtime, making sure that people know that there's a consistent effort to monitor safety there. But then there's the flip side, at night and on the weekends, that there's more work that needs to be done to keep that area safe. And so what we want to do is activate that plaza as frequently as possible. And so, for the folks that are seeing this, we're really looking to partner with a variety of organizations and create a community calendar. That's my goal. Like, I would love, I think, to have that plaza activated weekly at the very least, and if not, daily. Why not? Let's aim for that, and have a variety of organizations in the plaza providing services, providing information, doing events for families, making sure that folks are getting access to free or low-cost services. And so we've been having discussions with Lincoln Hospital and the Acacia Network. We work very closely with the community board, and we're really looking to also have conversations with business owners and property owners to activate that space more regularly. And so some of the things that we're looking to do is really have special days in the plaza where there are a variety of things going on. And I think by activating that plaza, we're creating a greater sense of safety, there's more visibility, and people will feel more comfortable using that plaza in positive ways. And so that's something that we're looking at. And at the same time, also, we're having conversations with DOT, with the community board, and really thinking about what are some enhancements or improvements from a structural perspective that can be made to the plaza as well. I think one of the other things that we really want to do is bring in more public art, murals, art installations, not just in Roberto Clemente Plaza, but throughout the district, to again demonstrate to the community that there's investment, that there's stewardship of the district.
And I definitely want to expand on the idea of adding arts and culture into a neighborhood that has a lot of culture. How could that help revitalize the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first questions that I asked myself, that I continue to ask myself, is how does the Third Avenue Business Improvement District reflect the community? And in many ways it does. But there are more visible ways that we can demonstrate, the history, the culture, the different languages that are spoken in this community. And so that's something that we're definitely exploring through art, through community projects, through working with local schools, local artists, to really make that a more frequent experience. Another way that I'm hoping to activate spaces is also through vacant storefronts. And this is something that other bids have done where, there's a vacant storefront, there isn't a business there now, but using that as an opportunity to promote the space, to have a community event, to have an artist, some kind of activation, and just make sure that space doesn't linger there. And that's something that we're also looking to do, is we really want to have as low of a vacancy rate as possible, because when a business is vacant, that really can attract unwanted activity. And so that's something that we want to make sure that we're being proactive about as well.
And I would say it's also definitely an amazing opportunity for people who have like small local businesses to kind of get their, their business out there, like with pop-ups. I've seen that, become a really big thing in the city, and it would be beautiful to see that kind of, become a thing here in the Bronx. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Now, as you work on these various initiatives, how will you ensure that the voices of local residents and business owners are incorporated into the planning and decision-making process?
Yeah, so one of the first ways that we did that when I first started in February was I launched a community survey on our website that we disseminated to the community board, on social media, through our newsletter. And then right now, through a grant from SBS, we also have the Avenue NYC grant, which allows us to conduct what's called a commercial district needs assessment over this next year. That needs assessment should be completed by the summer, and it's completed in phases. And those phases include engaging stakeholders. So our new program manager, Benjamin Engel, who was hired in September, is going to be doing a series of outreach initiatives to get feedback from property owners, business owners, residents, commuters, and anyone that comes through the district on feedback as to things like, what do you like about the district? What do you not like? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the opportunities? What are the types of businesses that you don't see here that you would like to see here? Sanitation conditions, public safety. We're going to be getting feedback over this next year from all of those different stakeholders, and that's going to be used to inform our programming in years 2 and 3 of the grant. So community feedback is something that we always want, that people can always give us. That's why we've been really, really on top of sending out our newsletter every month so that people are hearing from us and that we're being transparent. We also have what's called an annual membership meeting every year, typically in the summer. And anyone who works, lives, or has a business or a property in the district can attend that meeting. And so we usually put out a public notice about that meeting, so people should look out for that for next summer. And that's another way that we get input from the community. But people can always reach out to us if they have questions.
And then can you quickly let everybody know where they can go?
Yeah, so our website is thirdavenuebid.org. They can also find us on social media, on Instagram at Third Avenue Bid Hub. We're also on LinkedIn. And they can also just email us. Our contact information is on the website.
Well, Pedro, I want to thank you so much for joining us, sharing a little bit about your background and what you plan to do for the future of the Bronx.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. And remember, you can always watch this program anytime, anywhere on BronxNet.org and YouTube. While you're there, be sure to follow BronxNet on social media to find out who will be the next community leader we will sit down with on In the District. From BronxNet's Media and Technology Studios in the South Bronx, I'm Kibin Alleyne. Talk soon. All right, well, thank you so much for joining.